The moment I saw my husband's hand on her lower back, his assistant, I knew. The gala was supposed to be my night. But when he whispered, "You're embarrassing me," I made a choice. And the woman I brought? Let's just say, karma has a killer dress. Before this story unfolds, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. The invitation. The email arrived at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the subject line bold and unignorable. "You're invited, Sterling and Gray Annual Gala." Lauren Carter's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her breath catching. She'd spent 8 months pitching the Delacroix account, working late nights, swallowing every last-minute demand from clients who couldn't tell a demographic from a dermatologist. And now, finally, the reward. An invitation to the company's most exclusive event, where partners closed deals over vintage champagne and the CEO handed out promotions like after-dinner mints. She leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking beneath her, and allowed herself a small, private smile. This was her moment. Then her office door swung open. "Babe." Daniel stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, his smile too easy. "You're not going to believe this." Lauren's smile didn't fade, but something in her chest tightened. That tone, the one he used right before delivering news she wouldn't like, wrapped in a joke to soften the blow. "Try me," she said, keeping her voice light. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. "I just got a call from Richard Sterling." Her stomach dropped. Richard Sterling didn't call junior analysts. Unless. "He wants me at the gala," Daniel continued, running a hand through his hair. "Said it's critical. I network with the Tokyo team. Big move for the firm." Lauren's nails pressed into her palms. Daniel worked in risk assessment. A necessary department, sure, but not one that usually warranted FaceTime with the CEO. Not like her role in client strategy. "That's great," she said carefully. "We can go together." Daniel hesitated. A beat too long. "Actually." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I was thinking I'd bring Sophie." Sophie. His 24-year-old assistant, who wore blazers 2 sizes too small and laughed at all his jokes, even the ones that weren't funny. Lauren's pulse thudded in her ears. "Why?" "She's been helping me prep the presentation," Daniel said, as if that explained anything. "And let's be honest, you've been swamped. This'll be one less thing for you to stress about." The words slithered under her skin. "One less thing for you to stress about." As if she were some fragile thing, moments away from crumbling under the weight of her own career. Before she could respond, Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his mouth quirking. "Speaking of Sophie." Lauren stood abruptly, her chair rolling back with a sharp scrape. "I need coffee." She didn't wait for his reply. The break room was empty, thank God. Lauren braced her hands against the counter, staring at her reflection in the stainless steel fridge. 34 years old, dark circles under her eyes from too many late nights, hair pulled into a knot that had started the day as a sleek chignon. Pathetic. A voice cut through her thoughts. "If you glare any harder, the fridge might quit." Lauren turned. Eleanor Grant stood in the doorway, a mug in one hand, a file in the other. At 62, the former CEO of Vance & Locke moved like she still owned every room she entered. Shoulders back, chin high, silver hair swept into an elegant twist. Lauren forced a smile. Just debating whether caffeine or a nervous breakdown would be more productive. Eleanor snorted, pouring herself a cup. "At our age, we're entitled to both." A laugh escaped Lauren, sharp and unexpected. Then from the hallway, Daniel's voice carried in, loud and mocking. "Like that old bat, Grant. Christ, no wonder Vance & Locke folded. Who hires a woman that age to run anything?" The blood drained from Lauren's face. Eleanor didn't flinch. She took a slow sip of coffee, her gaze steady on Lauren. "Ah," she said mildly. "I see your husband's as charming as ever." Lauren's fists clenched. Humiliation burned hot in her throat. For herself, for Eleanor, for every woman who'd ever been written off for wrinkles instead of merit. Eleanor set down her mug. "You're going to that gala, aren't you?" Lauren exhaled. "I don't know." Eleanor's smile was razor thin. "Good. Because neither does he." And just like that, the spark of an idea flickered to life. The betrayal. The gala was being held at the Sterling and Gray headquarters, a towering glass monolith in the heart of Manhattan, where the elevators were lined with gold and the air smelled like money and ambition. Lauren had been here 100 times, but tonight the building felt foreign. Like she was walking into a battlefield in a dress that cost half her paycheck. She adjusted the strap of her emerald green gown, the one Daniel had once said made her eyes look almost pretty. Almost. The word echoed in her head as she stepped out of the cab, her heels clicking against the pavement. The lobby was a whirl of sequins and tuxedos, the clink of champagne flutes mixing with laughter that was just a little too loud. Lauren scanned the crowd, her stomach twisting. She hadn't told Daniel she was coming. Then she saw them. Daniel stood near the bar, his arm draped casually around Sophie's waist. She was wearing red. Of course she was. A slinky, backless thing that clung to her like it was painted on. Lauren watched as Daniel leaned down to whisper something in her ear, watched as Sophie threw her head back and laughed, her manicured hand resting on his chest. Lauren's breath came sharp and fast. She'd known, of course. Known from the late nights, the texts that always seemed to buzz just as Daniel stepped into the shower. But knowing and seeing were two different things. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne. Lauren grabbed a glass and drained it in one go. "Easy there, Tiger," a voice murmured beside her. "Save some liquid courage for the main event." Lauren turned. Eleanor stood there, resplendent in a tailored black tuxedo dress, her silver hair swept into a sleek chignon. She looked like a woman who'd walked out of a noir film, all sharp edges and quiet danger. "You came," Lauren said, her voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor's lips curved. "Did you really think I'd miss this?" Before Lauren could respond, a booming voice cut through the crowd. "Lauren, there you are." Richard Sterling, CEO of Sterling and Gray, was weaving toward them, his face flushed with good whiskey and better ego. He clapped a hand on Lauren's shoulder, his grip just a little too tight. "Glad you could make it. We were starting to think you'd skip town." Lauren forced a smile. "Wouldn't miss it." Richard's gaze slid past her, landing on Daniel and Sophie. "Ah, I see your husband's already here." And with his star assistant no less. He winked as if they were all in on some delightful secret. Lauren's nails bit into her palms. Richard didn't seem to notice. Sophie's been a real asset to the Tokyo deal. In fact, he lowered his voice, leaning in like he was sharing a confidence. "We're thinking of moving her to client strategy. You know, your department." The room tilted. Eleanor's hand closed around Lauren's elbow, steadying her. "How interesting," she said, her voice cool. "I didn't realize Sterling and Gray was in the habit of rewarding incompetence." Richard blinked. "Excuse me." Eleanor smiled, the kind of smile a shark gives right before it bites. Sophie's last presentation was riddled with errors. I'd hate to see what she could do with an entire department. Richard's face went slack. You saw her presentation?" Eleanor's gaze didn't waver. "I see everything, Richard. Just ask your predecessor." A beat of silence. Then Richard cleared his throat, his eyes darting between them. "Right. Well, enjoy the party." He vanished into the crowd, his steps just a little too quick. Lauren turned to Eleanor. "What was that?" Eleanor sipped her champagne. "Just reminding him that some of us still have teeth." Across the room, Daniel had finally spotted them. His smile faltered, his grip on Sophie tightening. Lauren straightened her shoulders. "Let's go say hello." Eleanor's grin was all mischief. "I thought you'd never ask." The ally. The air between Lauren and Daniel crackled with tension as they crossed the ballroom floor. She could see the calculations flashing behind his eyes, the quick, panicked reassessment of the situation. His grip on Sophie's waist loosened just slightly, his smile tightening into something that almost looked like guilt. "Almost." "Lauren," he said, his voice too loud, too cheerful. "You made it. I thought you had that, report to finish." The lie hung in the air between them, clumsy and transparent. Lauren felt Eleanor's presence at her side like a silent pillar of strength. "I finished it," Lauren said evenly. "Turns out I had time for both." Sophie's gaze darted between them, her fingers nervously adjusting the strap of her dress. "Lauren, you look amazing," she gushed, her voice pitched high with forced brightness. "That color is so bold." Lauren didn't blink. "Thanks." Red was already taken. A beat of awkward silence. Then Daniel's eyes flicked to Eleanor, his brow furrowing in recognition. "Wait, you're Eleanor Grant, aren't you?" Eleanor inclined her head, her expression unreadable. "Daniel." I've heard so much about you. Something in her tone made the back of Daniel's neck flush. He cleared his throat. I didn't realize you two knew each other. We go way back, Lauren said, her voice smooth. Eleanor was my mentor at Vance and Locke. Before it folded, as you so kindly put it. Daniel's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, to protest, to backtrack, but before he could speak, a hush fell over the crowd. All heads turned as Richard Sterling stepped onto the small stage at the front of the room, tapping his glass with a spoon. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention. Lauren barely registered his words. Her pulse roared in her ears, her entire body humming with adrenaline. She could feel Daniel's anxious energy beside her, could see the way Sophie was chewing her bottom lip raw. But Eleanor was perfectly still, her gaze fixed on Richard with the quiet intensity of a predator watching its prey. Richard beamed at the crowd. Tonight, we celebrate another year of Sterling and Gray's success, and the incredible team that makes it all possible. Polite applause rippled through the room. But before we get to the dancing, I have a very special announcement to make. Lauren's stomach twisted. She knew what was coming. Richard's smile widened. Effective immediately, we'll be restructuring our client strategy division, and leading that charge will be someone who's already proven herself indispensable to this firm. His eyes scanned the crowd, landing squarely on Sophie Mercer. The applause was deafening. Sophie's hands flew to her mouth in exaggerated surprise, her eyes shining with tears. Daniel clapped a little too enthusiastically, his relief palpable. Lauren stood frozen, the room tilting around her. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a public execution. Then Eleanor's hand found hers, squeezing tight. Richard wasn't finished. Sophie will be taking over all major accounts, including the Delacroix portfolio. That's my client, Lauren whispered, the words tearing from her throat. Eleanor's grip tightened. Not for long. Before Lauren could respond, Eleanor stepped forward, her voice cutting through the applause like a knife. Richard, darling, before you hand over the keys to the kingdom, perhaps you should check your paperwork. The room went silent. Richard's smile faltered. I'm sorry. Eleanor didn't blink. The Delacroix contract. Clause 7.6, subsection B. It's quite clear. Any transfer of primary account management requires written consent from the client. She tilted her head. And unless Jean-Claude Delacroix has developed a sudden fondness for. Her gaze flicked to Sophie. Spreadsheets, I doubt you've obtained that. A murmur spread through the crowd. Richard's face darkened. Eleanor, this really isn't the time. Oh, I disagree, Eleanor said lightly. In fact, I think it's the perfect time. She reached into her clutch, withdrawing a single sheet of paper. Because Jean-Claude and I had a lovely chat this afternoon. He's very interested in Lauren's new venture. Lauren's breath caught. New venture? Eleanor handed the paper to Richard. His eyes scanned the document, his face growing paler with each passing second. When he looked up, his expression was pure panic. You can't be serious, he hissed. Eleanor's smile was glacial. Deadly. Daniel stepped forward, his voice tight. What's going on? Richard ignored him, his attention locked on Lauren. You're leaving? Just like that. Lauren looked at Eleanor, then back at Richard. The words came easily, fueled by months of swallowed anger. No, Richard. Not just like that. She stepped closer, her voice dropping. I'm taking Delacroix with me. And if you fight me on it, I'll take the Kensington account too. Remember who brought them to the table in the first place. The room was utterly silent. Sophie looked like she might be sick. Daniel's mouth hung open, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Eleanor linked her arm through Lauren's. Shall we? Lauren took one last look at the stunned faces around her, at Richard's fury, Daniel's disbelief, Sophie's dawning horror, and smiled. We shall. And with that, they turned and walked out of the gala, leaving the whispers and the scandal and the wreckage of Lauren's old life behind them. The reckoning. The cold night air hit Lauren's face like a slap as she and Eleanor stepped out of the gala. Behind them, the muted sounds of the party continued. Champagne glasses clinking, nervous laughter bubbling up. But here on the sidewalk, there was only silence and the distant hum of Manhattan traffic. Lauren's hands trembled. She wasn't sure if it was from adrenaline or the weight of what had just happened. Eleanor, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What the hell was that document you gave Richard? Eleanor flagged down a cab with a practiced wave of her hand. Get in. I'll explain everything. The cab smelled faintly of pine air freshener and old leather. Lauren stared out the window as the city lights blurred past, her reflection ghostly in the glass. She could still see Daniel's face, that stunned, slack-jawed expression when she'd walked out. Eleanor broke the silence. Jean-Claude Delacroix and I go way back. Before Sterling and Gray, before Vance and Locke. He's always been particular about who handles his business. She turned to Lauren, her eyes sharp. And he hates incompetence. Lauren swallowed. So when you said he was interested in my new venture, I may have implied you were starting your own firm, Eleanor said smoothly. And that he'd be your first client. The cab hit a pothole, jolting them both. Lauren's stomach lurched. But I'm not starting a firm. I don't even have a plan. You do now. Eleanor reached into her clutch and pulled out a business card, handing it to Lauren. It was crisp, heavy stock. Grant and Carter Consulting, it read in elegant embossed lettering. Lauren's breath caught. When did you? Last week. Eleanor's mouth quirked. I had a feeling you'd be available soon. The cab pulled up to a sleek high-rise on the Upper East Side, Eleanor's building. The doorman nodded as they stepped out. Evening, Miss Grant. Eleanor led Lauren to the elevator, pressing the button for the penthouse. You're not the only one Richard Sterling has screwed over, you know, she said as the elevator ascended. He's been pushing out anyone over 40 for years. Calling them out of touch. Her voice dripped with disdain. As if experience is a liability. The elevator doors opened directly into Eleanor's apartment. A sprawling space of floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art. Lauren barely had time to take it in before Eleanor marched to a sleek glass desk and pulled out a folder. These, she said, sliding it across the desk, are the names and contact information of every client Richard has alienated in the past 2 years. And these, she tapped a second folder, are the resumes of every talented executive he's forced into early retirement. Lauren flipped through the files, her pulse quickening. These weren't just names, they were opportunities. Big ones. Eleanor poured 2 glasses of scotch, handing one to Lauren. To new beginnings. Lauren hesitated. Eleanor, why are you doing this? For the first time all night Eleanor's steely demeanor cracked. Just a fraction. Because no one did it for me, she said quietly. Then she raised her glass. And because watching Richard Sterling's face turn that particular shade of purple was the most fun I've had in a decade. Lauren clinked her glass against Eleanor's, the sound ringing clear in the quiet apartment. Outside, the city glittered, endless possibilities stretching out before them. Somewhere across town, Daniel was probably still at the gala, scrambling to do damage control. Richard would be furious. Sophie would be panicking. Lauren took a slow sip of scotch, the warmth spreading through her chest. Let them burn. The price of ambition. Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Eleanor's penthouse, painting geometric patterns across the scattered documents on the marble coffee table. Lauren woke with a stiff neck. She'd fallen asleep on Eleanor's designer sofa, surrounded by contracts and business plans. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint citrus scent of Eleanor's cleaning staff's polish. Eleanor, already dressed in a tailored navy pantsuit, sat perched on a modernist chair, her reading glasses balanced on the tip of her nose as she scanned the New York Times with visible satisfaction. Good. You're awake, she said without looking up. Page 6 should interest you. Lauren rubbed her eyes, the events of last night rushing back. The gala, Daniel's betrayal, Eleanor's bombshell. She reached for the paper, her fingers leaving faint smudges on the crisp stock. There it was, Sterling and Gray in turmoil after gala drama. Rising star takes key client and exits. The article stopped just short of calling it a corporate mutiny, but the implication was clear. A grainy photo showed Richard Sterling mid-outburst, his face contorted in rage as Lauren and Eleanor walked away. Jean-Claude called an hour ago, Eleanor said, sipping her espresso. He's drafting the termination letter to Sterling and Gray as we speak. Wants to meet with us at noon to discuss his exciting new partnership. She smirked. I do love it when men convince themselves they thought of our ideas first. Lauren's phone buzzed violently on the table. Daniel's name flashed across the screen for the 12th time since dawn. She silenced it with a stab of her finger. Eleanor arched an eyebrow. You should answer. If only to savor the sound of his panic. Lauren exhaled sharply and picked up. What? Daniel's voice crackled through, high-pitched and fraying at the edges. Lauren, Jesus Christ. What the hell were you thinking? Richard's losing it. The board's emergency meeting in an hour, and you're worried about your promotion, Lauren finished coldly. She could practically hear him sweating through the phone. A beat of silence. Then quieter. We need to talk. In person. Eleanor mouthed lobby bar at the Pierre. Noon. Lauren relayed the location and hung up before Daniel could protest. Perfect timing, Eleanor purred. Jean-Claude will see you arriving with purpose while Daniel watches his career implode. She rose, straightening her cuffs. Now, let's discuss your first official act as partner. She tossed a thick folder onto Lauren's lap. Lauren flipped it open to find a dossier on Miranda Langford, a legendary tech investor forced into early retirement last year. The Dragon Queen of Silicon Alley? Lauren frowned. She hasn't taken a meeting in years. Exactly. Eleanor's smile was all teeth. Miranda despises Richard more than I do. And she controls the Kensington Fund. The Kensington Fund, Sterling and Gray's biggest client. Lauren's pulse quickened. You want me to poach them? I want you to avenge them, Eleanor corrected. Miranda only respects two things, nerve and results. Good thing you have both. He checked her watch. Her driver will pick you up at 3. Until then. She gestured to a garment bag hanging by the door. Wear that. And for God's sake, shower. You look like you fought a war last night. Lauren almost laughed. She had. As steam from the shower filled the bathroom, Lauren studied her reflection. The dark circles under her eyes, the set of her jaw. Something had shifted. The woman who'd walked into that gala desperate to prove her worth was gone. In her place stood someone who knew it. Her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. Saw the news. Heard you're making moves. Coffee soon? Langford. Lauren grinned. The game was on. By the time she emerged in the sleek black Stella McCartney dress Eleanor had chosen, the penthouse was empty save for a note in elegant script. The lioness doesn't beg for her seat at the table. She brings her own chair. Lauren tucked the note into her purse, her fingers brushing the embossed Grant and Carter business cards. Time to hunt. The Lion's Den. The Pierre's lobby bar hummed with the quiet tension of midday power meetings. Crystal glasses clinked against saucers as Lauren crossed the marble floor, her heels sinking into the plush carpet. She spotted Daniel immediately, hunched over a corner table, his usually perfect hair disheveled, 3 empty espresso cups lined up like fallen soldiers before him. He stood when he saw her, knocking his knee against the table. You came. Lauren slid into the chair opposite him without touching the menu. I'm here to watch you squirm. Let's not pretend otherwise. Daniel's jaw tightened. Look, I know you're angry. Angry? Lauren laughed, low and humorless. I'm delighted, Daniel. Watching Richard realize he bet on the wrong horse? Priceless. She signaled the waiter. Gin martini. Extra olives. Daniel leaned forward, his voice dropping to a hiss. Do you have any idea what you've done? The Delacroix account was 30% of our revenue stream. Richard's talking lawsuits. Let him. Lauren accepted her drink, taking a slow sip. Jean-Claude's contract has a morality clause. And after last night's spectacle, he shrugged. Even Sterling and Gray's lawyers can't spin sexual harassment as good business practice. Daniel paled. That's not, Sophie and I never. Save it. Lauren set down her glass with a sharp click. I didn't come here for excuses. I came to tell you one thing. Stay out of my way. A shadow fell across the table. Now. Is that any way to treat your husband? Lauren's spine went rigid. Richard Sterling stood over them, his custom Brioni suit straining across his shoulders, his cologne, something aggressively expensive, clinging to the air like a threat. Daniel shot to his feet. Richard, I can explain. Sit down, Daniel. Richard didn't look at him. His bloodshot eyes stayed locked on Lauren. I suppose you think you're clever. Lauren didn't blink. I think I'm employed. Which is more than you'll be when the board sees those embezzlement reports Eleanor just sent them. Richard's left eye twitched. You're bluffing. Am I? Lauren reached into her bag, sliding a single sheet across the table. A duplicate of the document she'd watched Eleanor's lawyer notarize that morning. Funny how all those accounting errors trace back to your offshore accounts. Daniel snatched up the paper, his hands shaking as he scanned the figures. Richard, what the hell is this? The CEO's veneer cracked. You ungrateful little. Aha. Lauren tapped her phone screen, activating the recording app she'd started the moment Richard appeared. Careful what you say next. Discovery would love this. Richard's face purpled. For one glorious second Lauren thought he might actually stroke out. Then with a snarl he turned on his heel and stormed out, nearly appending a waiter's tray of champagne flutes. Daniel stared after him, then at Lauren, something like horror dawning in his expression. You planned this. Lauren finished her martini. We both know I was never the dumb one in this marriage. She stood, smoothing her dress. Oh, and Daniel, change the locks. I'll have my things collected by noon tomorrow. She was halfway to the door when her phone vibrated. A notification from her Uber app. Miranda Langford's private driver, arriving in 8 minutes. Right on schedule. Behind her, Daniel called out, You'll regret this, Lauren. She didn't turn around. The late afternoon sun hit her face as she stepped onto Fifth Avenue. Somewhere in the city, Eleanor was charming Jean-Claude Delacroix, Richard Sterling was sweating through his 4th lawyer meeting of the day, and Miranda Langford waited with the keys to an empire. Lauren breathed deep, the crisp autumn air filling her lungs with promise. Regret? She couldn't wait. The Dragon Queen's terms. The black Maybach glided to a stop before a converted warehouse in Tribeca, its tinted windows reflecting the orange glow of sunset. Lauren checked the address twice. This unmarked entrance couldn't possibly lead to Miranda Langford's legendary headquarters. Then the driver spoke for the first time. 3rd freight elevator. She dislikes waiting. The elevator opened directly into a soaring loft space where industrial met imperial. Steel beams crisscrossed above a collection of Ming Dynasty vases, their delicate blues vibrant against the raw concrete walls. At the far end, behind a desk carved from a single slab of petrified wood, sat the woman whose nickname had once made Wall Street bankers tremble. Miranda Langford didn't stand. Didn't smile. Her razor-cut silver hair framed a face that had perfected the art of disdain. Carter. She gestured to the chair opposite her. I'd say nice to meet you, but we both know this isn't social. Lauren sat, crossing her ankles. I appreciate your time. Time. Miranda's laugh was a dry crackle. What I appreciate is watching Richard Sterling piss himself on page 6. She slid a tablet across the desk. On screen, security footage showed Richard screaming at a paralegal in Sterling and Gray's lobby that morning. His board's emergency session starts in. She checked her diamond-encrusted Patek Philippe. 23 minutes. Lauren kept her face neutral despite her racing pulse. Then we should talk about Kensington before they vote. Miranda steepled her fingers. Eleanor tells me you're fearless. I see she neglected to mention you're also rude. A beat. I like that. She tapped the desk and a hidden panel slid open, revealing 2 tumblers of amber liquid. Single malt. 1962. The year Sterling's father was still shining shoes on Wall Street. Lauren accepted the glass but didn't drink. What do you want for Kensington? Straight to the throat. Excellent. Miranda leaned forward, her jade necklace catching the light. 3 conditions. 1. You personally handle my account. No junior associates, no delegating. 2. When I say jump, you ask how high while already in the air. She took a slow sip. 3. You fire Daniel publicly before the week's end. Lauren's glass halted halfway to her lips. He's not my employee. He will be. Miranda smiled. Because Sterling's board will vote him interim CEO within the hour. A sacrificial lamb to appease shareholders. And when you take Kensington? He shrugged. His first official act will be begging you to come back. The scotch burned Lauren's throat as she swallowed. Miranda's web was already woven, every player exactly where she wanted them. Why? Lauren asked. You could have crushed Sterling and Gray years ago. Miranda's gaze flicked to a black and white photo on the wall. A younger Eleanor Grant and herself at what looked like a 1990s trading floor. Some debts take decades to collect. She drained her glass. Do we have a deal? Outside, the sky had deepened to twilight, Manhattan's lights flickering on like a circuit board coming alive. Lauren thought of Daniel's face when he realized she held his fate in her hands. Thought of Richard's empire crumbling because he'd underestimated two women. She extended her hand. "We do." Miranda's grip was cool and dry. "Welcome to the war, Carter." Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and grinned. The board just voted." As if on cue, Lauren's phone lit up with Daniel's caller ID. Miranda raised an eyebrow. "Going to answer that?" Lauren silenced the call and stood. "I believe you mentioned something about making him wait?" The Dragon Queen's laughter followed her to the elevator, rich and dark as the scotch they'd shared. The offer. The rain had started by the time Lauren stepped out of Miranda's building, a cold autumn downpour that slicked the pavement black under the streetlights. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Daniel had called 7 times in the past hour. She silenced it again, watching the reflection of neon signs ripple in the growing puddles. A sleek town car pulled up, the window rolling down to reveal Eleanor's sharp profile. "Get in. You'll catch pneumonia in that dress." The car's interior was warm, smelling of leather and Eleanor's signature jasmine perfume. Lauren sank into the seat, her body humming with adrenaline. "Miranda wants me to publicly fire Daniel." Eleanor didn't look surprised. And Sterling's board just voted him interim CO. Eleanor's lips curled. "Perfect." She handed Lauren a tablet. The screen displayed a live feed from Sterling and Gray's headquarters. A pack of reporters clustered in the lobby, their cameras trained on Daniel as he stood at a hastily assembled podium. His suit was rumpled, his tie slightly crooked. Lauren turned up the volume. "Deeply honored by the board's confidence," Daniel was saying, his voice strained. "Our immediate priority is reassuring our clients that Sterling and Gray remains." A reporter cut in. "Is it true the Kensington Fund is withdrawing?" Daniel's smile froze. "We don't comment on speculative." "What about Jean-Claude Delacroix?" "Sources say he's already signed with Grant and Carter." The camera caught the exact moment Daniel's composure cracked. A flicker of panic in his eyes before he schooled his expression. "Lauren Carter is a talented professional, and we wish her well in her new venture." He cleared his throat. "Now if you'll excuse me." The feed cut off. Eleanor took the tablet back. "He lasted 3 minutes. Pathetic." Lauren stared out the window, watching the rain streak the glass. "He'll call again." "Of course he will." Eleanor's tone was matter-of-fact. "The question is, what will you say when he does?" The car slowed to a stop outside Lauren's apartment building. She hesitated, her hand on the door. "What would you do?" Eleanor met her gaze, unflinching. "I'd make him beg." Inside the apartment, Lauren kicked off her heels and poured herself a glass of wine. The penthouse was too quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against her ears. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, Daniel was scrambling to salvage his career. Richard was probably on his 3rd scotch. And Miranda Langford was watching it all unfold with that razor-sharp smile. Her phone buzzed again. "Daniel." This time she answered. "Lauren." His relief was palpable. "Thank God. Listen, we need to talk. In person." She swirled the wine in her glass. "About what?" "About look, just meet me. Please." "The usual place." 1 hour. The usual place. Their old spot. A quiet bar tucked away in the West Village where they'd celebrated promotions and anniversaries. Where he'd whispered promises he'd never kept. Lauren took a slow sip of wine. "Fine. 1 hour." She hung up before he could respond, then texted Eleanor and Miranda a single word. Phase 2. The bar was dimly lit, all dark wood and amber glass. Daniel sat in their usual booth, 2 drinks already waiting. He stood when she entered, his expression a mix of hope and desperation. "You came." Lauren slid into the booth but didn't touch the drink. "Talk." Daniel leaned forward, his voice low. "I know I screwed up. I know you're angry. But this, what you're doing with Miranda and Eleanor, it's going to destroy Sterling and Gray." She arched a brow. And I'm offering you a way out." He pushed a folder across the table. "Come back. As co-CEO. Full equity. We'll fire Richard together. You'll have everything you ever wanted." Lauren opened the folder. The terms were generous. Too generous. She flipped to the last page and froze. A post-it note was stuck to the corner, written in Sophie's looping handwriting. He's lying. Lauren looked up. Daniel was watching her, his eyes wide with something like fear. She smiled and closed the folder. You're right. I do want everything. She stood, sliding the folder back to him. But I don't need you to get it. His face fell. Lauren. Oh, and Daniel? She leaned in, her voice a whisper. Sophie says hi. Then she turned and walked out, leaving him gaping in the booth, the weight of his betrayal crashing down around him. The pawn's gambit. The rain had intensified by the time Lauren stepped out of the bar, turning the sidewalks into mirrors that reflected the neon glow of the city. She barely noticed. Her mind raced with the implications of Sophie's note, 3 simple words that changed everything. A taxi screeched to a halt in front of her, its yellow paint gleaming under the streetlights. The back window rolled down to reveal Sophie herself, her usual polished appearance replaced by smudged mascara and a rain-soaked blouse. Get in, she said, her voice raw. Before he realizes I'm gone. Lauren hesitated for only a second before yanking the door open. The cab smelled of wet leather and Sophie's overpriced perfume. You're working against him. Lauren stated it as fact, watching the younger woman closely. Sophie wiped at her eyes with a shaking hand. I never wanted any of this. The promotion, the lies, he told me you were having an affair with Richard. That your marriage was just for show. A bitter laugh escaped her. God, I was so stupid. The cab swerved around a corner, sending rainwater cascading over the windshield. Lauren studied Sophie, the genuine tremor in her hands, the way her gaze kept darting to the side mirror. This wasn't an act. Why the note? Sophie reached into her purse and pulled out a phone. With a few taps, she brought up a series of emails, all between Daniel and Richard dating back months. Lauren scanned them quickly, her stomach turning. Once Lauren's out, we'll restructure her division. Sophie's young enough to mold. The Delacroix account will follow her. We'll need leverage. Don't worry about the prenup. I've got a plan. The last one was dated 2 days before the gala. Sophie's voice was barely audible over the rain. He was never going to let you walk away with anything. Not your clients, not your reputation. She swallowed hard. Not even your apartment. The cab pulled up to a nondescript office building in Midtown. Sophie pressed a keycard into Lauren's hand. 12th floor. There's someone you need to meet. The elevator doors opened to reveal a sleek law office, its glass walls offering a panoramic view of the stormlit city. A woman in her 50s stood waiting, her silver blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, her black suit crisp against the white furnishings. Miss Carter. She extended a hand. Victoria Strauss. I represent Sophie's interests in this unfortunate situation. Lauren's gaze flicked between them. What exactly is happening here? Victoria gestured to a conference room where a series of documents were laid out. My client has been gathering evidence of Mr. Carter's financial malfeasance for months. Embezzlement. Insider trading. And most interestingly, she tapped a highlighted bank statement. Several large, undocumented transfers to an account in the Caymans, all coinciding with your major client acquisitions. Lauren's breath caught. He was stealing from my accounts. From your joint assets, Victoria corrected. Which, as I understand it, violates the terms of your prenuptial agreement. Sophie hovered near the window, her arms wrapped around herself. He did the same thing to his first wife. I didn't know until after the gala. A clap of thunder shook the windows, the storm reaching its crescendo outside. Lauren picked up one of the documents, her fingers steady despite the rage coursing through her. These are federal offenses. Victoria smiled thinly. Indeed they are. And with Sophie's testimony. I'll do it, Sophie interrupted, her voice stronger now. Whatever you need. After what he put you through, what he made me do. Lauren studied the younger woman, really studied her. The guilt in her eyes was real. The fear was real. And the determination? That was new. She turned to Victoria. What's the play? The attorney slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a draft complaint, ready for filing. At the top, bold letters spelled out, Carter versus Carter. First we freeze his assets. Then, Victoria adjusted her glasses. We bury him. Outside, lightning split the sky in two. Counter-Strike. The storm raged outside Victoria Strauss's office windows, rain lashing against the glass like 1,000 tiny fists. Lauren traced the embossed letterhead on the legal complaint, Carter versus Carter, the words heavier than she'd expected. "We file this tomorrow," Victoria said, gathering the documents into a leather portfolio. "By noon the SEC will freeze his accounts. By close of business he'll be escorted from Sterling and Gray's building." Sophie stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the polished concrete floor. "He'll know it was me." Her voice trembled. "He keeps a gun in his desk." A chill ran down Lauren's spine. She'd seen that Glock herself, Daniel showing it off after some paranoid article about office shootings. "For protection," he'd said. Victoria didn't look up from her paperwork. "Which is why you'll be at my Hamptons estate until this is resolved. My security team is thorough." Lauren's phone buzzed. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen with a single-line text. "Richard just resigned. Board emergency vote in 30. Come now." She stood, smoothing her still damp dress. "I have to go." Sophie caught her arm. "Daniel won't go quietly." Her nails bit into Lauren's skin. "He has friends you don't know about." Sterling and Gray's headquarters hummed with panicked energy. Lauren bypassed the crowded lobby elevators, using Eleanor's private access code to reach the executive floor. The doors opened to chaos. Junior associates sprinting with document boxes, the CFO shouting into his phone, a janitor mopping up what smelled like vomit outside Richard's old office. Eleanor waited by the boardroom doors, her posture impossibly calm amid the bedlam. "Took you long enough." Lauren fell into step beside her. Sophie flipped. "We have." "Later." Eleanor silenced her with a look as they entered the boardroom. 20 faces turned toward them. The entire board sat shell-shocked around the mahogany table, half-empty coffee cups and abandoned sandwiches littering the surface. At the head, Daniel stood with his sleeves rolled up, his tie missing, his hair sticking up in tufts. He froze when he saw Lauren. Board Chairman Gerald Whitman cleared his throat. "Miss Carter." "How unexpected." Eleanor glided forward. "Given recent developments, my partner and I thought it prudent to offer Sterling and Gray a lifeline." She placed a slim folder on the table. "Our terms for acquiring Kensington's portion of your distressed assets." Daniel's laugh was jagged. "You can't just waltz in here and—" "Actually," Gerald interrupted, "given that you're currently under investigation for embezzlement, Mr. Carter, you'll refrain from speaking unless directly addressed." The room went deathly quiet. Lauren watched the color drain from Daniel's face. He hadn't expected them to move this fast. Gerald adjusted his glasses as he scanned Eleanor's proposal. "These numbers are generous." He looked up. "Assuming Kensington approves?" As if on cue, the doors swung open again. Miranda Langford strode in, her signature jade necklace glinting under the fluorescent lights. "They do." Daniel's chair crashed to the floor as he stood. "This is a setup. Lauren's been planning this for 6 years, 7 months and 14 days. Miranda's voice cut like glass. "Since the first time you took credit for her work at the Wellington pitch." She turned to the board. "Gentlemen, I suggest you vote before the FBI finishes processing Mr. Carter's computer." Daniel's phone chose that moment to ring. The caller ID flashed Federal Defenders. Gerald didn't bother calling for a formal vote. "The motion carries. Ms. Grant, Ms. Carter, welcome to Sterling and Gray." Daniel lunged across the table, sending documents flying. "You bitch." Security was on him in seconds, dragging him toward the door. As they passed Lauren, he spat at her feet. "You think you've won? Wait till." The doors cut off his threat. Miranda sighed. "Always so dramatic." She plucked a grape from the abandoned fruit platter. "Now, shall we discuss who really owns Richard's shares?" Lauren met Eleanor's gaze across the table. The game wasn't over. But the board had just changed. The insurance file. The silence in Sterling and Gray's boardroom lasted exactly 8 seconds after security dragged Daniel away. Lauren counted. Then chaos erupted. "Those acquisition numbers are absurd." The CFO slammed his fist on the table, sending a coffee cup rattling. "We can't possibly." Miranda Langford flicked a grape at his head. It bounced off his temple. "Read the fine print, Henry. The offer drops 20% every hour you stall." Lauren barely registered the argument. Her attention was fixed on Daniel's abandoned briefcase. Its latch popped open during the struggle. A manila folder peeked out, the edge of a photograph visible. Eleanor noticed it too. With a subtle shift of her body, she blocked the board's view while Lauren palmed the folder. Need to review the SEC filings before. Richard's shares are still in dispute. Call our outside counsel. The voices blurred as Lauren slipped the folder into her bag. Whatever Daniel had been about to say before security took him, whatever threat had been cut off, it was in here. She could feel it. Eleanor touched her elbow. We're done here. Miranda stayed behind to entertain the board while Eleanor and Lauren took the private elevator down. The moment the doors closed, Lauren yanked out the folder. The first photo stole her breath. Her and Jean-Claude Delacroix at last year's charity gala, his hand on her waist as they laughed. Innocent enough, except someone had photoshopped the image to make his grip look possessive, her dress more revealing. Beneath it, printed emails Lauren had never sent, filled with suggestive comments about client meetings in hotel rooms. Blackmail material, Eleanor murmured. How original. Lauren flipped to the next page. A notarized affidavit from Sophie dated 2 weeks prior, claiming Lauren had coerced her into lying about Daniel. Then bank records showing large withdrawals from their joint account right before the gala. Fabricated evidence. All meticulously crafted to make her look like the villain. The final document was a draft lawsuit. Defamation and tortious interference with business relations, Carter versus Grant and Carter. The elevator dinged. The lobby. Eleanor snatched the folder, tucking it into her blazer. He was planning this for months. The affair accusations, the financial records. It was never just about keeping his job. He wanted to destroy you. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the afternoon sun. Lauren's hands shook as she hailed a cab. We need to find Sophie. If he's willing to go this far. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. The text contained a single image. Sophie's designer heels abandoned near the East River piers. One snapped heel dangling over the edge. Then a follow-up message. Tell the bitch to stand down. Or the next photo shows more than shoes. The cab pulled up. Eleanor took one look at Lauren's face and snapped into action. Get in. We're going to Victoria's office first. She needs to see this. Lauren barely heard her. The photo's timestamp showed 45 minutes ago, right after Sophie left the law office. Right after she'd betrayed Daniel. The cab peeled away from the curb just as Lauren's phone rang again. This time she recognized the number. The federal defender who'd called Daniel in the boardroom. She answered. A woman's voice, crisp and professional. Ms. Carter? I'm calling regarding your husband's arrest. He's requested you post bail. Pause. He says to remind you about the storage unit on West 58th. Says you'll understand. Lauren's blood ran cold. The storage unit where they'd kept their wedding albums. Her mother's antique china. Oh God. She gripped Eleanor's arm. My gun is in that unit. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. Daniel hadn't just been collecting blackmail, he'd been planting evidence. And if Sophie turned up dead with Lauren's registered firearm at the scene. The cab made an illegal U-turn, horns blaring. Victoria Strauss's office was no longer their destination. They needed to reach that storage unit first. The storage facility's fluorescent lights flickered like strobes as Lauren sprinted down the corridor, Eleanor's heels clicking sharply behind her. Unit 214B loomed ahead, its padlock intact, thank God. Lauren fumbled with the keys, her fingers numb with adrenaline. The metal door rolled up with a deafening clatter. And there stood Miranda Langford, calmly polishing a vintage revolver with a silk handkerchief. Took you long enough, she said, tossing the gun to Eleanor. This yours. Lauren's breath caught. The weapon looked like hers. Same Smith & Wesson model she'd bought for protection after a client stalker incident, but the serial number was filed off. That's not my gun. Obviously. Miranda kicked a metal box at her feet. Inside, stacks of documents bore Sterling and Gray's letterhead. Your idiot husband stored his entire paper trail here. Embezzlement records. Fake HR complaints. Even the receipts for Sophie's gifts. Her lip curled. Men like him always keep trophies. Eleanor flipped through the files. This is enough to put him away for a decade. A phone rang. Miranda answered, listened for 3 seconds, then hung up. Sophie's safe. My team pulled her from a taxi headed for JFK. She arched a brow at Lauren. She says Daniel promised her a Caribbean vacation. One-way ticket. The pieces clicked. Not a murder plot, a disappearance. Daniel meant to discredit Sophie, frame Lauren, and flee. Lauren's phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking. Former Sterling and Gracio Daniel Carter released on bail. Miranda smirked. Shall we go greet him? The courthouse steps swarmed with reporters. Daniel emerged looking hollow-eyed, his suit wrinkled from processing. He forced a smile for the cameras, then froze at the sight of Lauren, Eleanor, and Miranda waiting beside a black town car. Darling. Lauren held up the storage unit files. Forgot something? The color drained from his face. Miranda spoke loud enough for nearby reporters to hear. Mr. Carter, the SEC would like to discuss your Cayman accounts. The FBI has questions about Sophie Mercer's attempted kidnapping. And she adjusted her jade necklace, have video of you bribing a federal judge. A microphone boom swung toward them. Camera flashes erupted. Daniel lunged, not at Lauren but at a nearby reporter's van. He wrenched the door open and screamed at the driver, "Go. Now." The vehicle peeled away, leaving the press corps in chaos. Eleanor sighed. He'll be in Mexico by dawn. Let him run. Miranda slid into the town car. Prison's too good for him anyway. Lauren watched the van disappear into traffic. The anger she'd carried for months didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. He turned to Eleanor. What now? Eleanor handed her the revolver and the files. Now, she said, we build an empire. As the town car pulled away, Lauren glanced at her reflection in the window. The woman staring back was someone new, someone unbreakable. Want more stories of cunning and comeback? Smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next.